Good evening and welcome to the Kuhn Academy for this installment of AP Government. We're building responsible voters one video at a time. Filling in for Mr. Kuhn today will be a special guest, Ms. Bonadies from room A16. Here you go, Ms. Bonadies.
Thank you. Again, welcome to the Kuhn Academy, all of you out there. Mr. Schneider, Congressman Schneider, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule today to speak to us. And I wanted to ask specifically, what do you think are your chances with re-election, considering that members of the House are up for re-election every 2 years?
Well, Ms. Bonadies, I would tell you my chances for re-election this year are very good because I'm an incumbent for the first time, all right? Meaning that I am already in office. And as we know in political science, people in office have a much greater tendency to be re-elected, and it's much stronger in the House than it is for the Senate. So I'm going to tell you about this incumbency effect and why you can expect to see me on the victory podium in 2014.
We look forward to hearing specific examples of the incumbency effect. As I always tell my AP government students, incumbency starts with N, I-N, or, well, it doesn't start with the letter N, but I-N, in office. Why do you feel people are more likely to recognize you than perhaps your opponent?
Well, being in Congress, I like to make a lot of public appearances. I visit high schools. I was actually at Mundelein High School last year to talk to the students in AP Government and AP Econ. And my name's in the news and things like that. So the name recognition is a huge advantage I got built in. And if you look here, Dennis Anderson is running in the district next door to me. Most people don't even know who he is because he's not in Congress, and you really don't see his name other than being on a sign. And Mr. Durbin, my colleague in the Senate, is running against this guy here named Doug Truax, and most people probably wouldn't recognize him in a grocery store or a library or a train station. So because they know me, I should have a huge advantage over Mr. Dole, my opponent.
So name recognition is clearly a big advantage. I have to say that many of my students didn't know your name as opposed to the opponents. Can you speak a little about the advantage of an incumbent as far as credit claiming, as to what that is and some specific examples?
Well, something a lot of us in Congress like to do is pork barrel spending. We like to have sponsored legislation that's going to bring money back to the district in the form of projects and public works and things like that. So we're going to claim credit for that and tell the constituents, hey, I cleaned up Waukegan Harbor, or I got this highway built, or I was able to secure funding for Highland Park High School in our district, or something like that. So my opponent doesn't get to do that because he really has nothing he can claim credit for. So, but usually this is only with pork barrel spending where this works, because we want to say we're bringing it back to the district. So be careful on your exam that Ms. Bonadies might be throwing out at you to say claiming credit for pork barrel spending. Just credit claiming doesn't really work. I mean, if I came to you and I said, hey, I got a post office named after, John Glenn, nobody would really care about that. But if I brought money in to make your roads cleaner, you'd love me.
So credit claiming, you want to claim credit for things that will actually benefit your constituents. Thank you for that insight, because I know my students and Mr. Kuhn's are having a debate on pork on Wednesday of this week. Can you speak a little bit about casework? I know my colleague, Mr. Kuhn, his father was was a constituent of Mr. Kirk, the senator, and he would frequently call to when he needed help with VA benefits. And I think that's an example of casework, but we would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, this one actually goes out to the people in my office. We have people in our office specifically designed to help constituents with all of their needs, whether it's veterans benefits, passports, even student loan applications. So my opponent doesn't really get to do that. He's just in his office campaigning, but my office can handle all of your problems. So when somebody goes to vote, they might say, hey, this guy helped me get tickets to the White House, and this guy, I don't know who he is. So the casework's a big advantage there. In fact, Mr. Wilhelm, the athletic director at your school, once told Mr. Kuhn that he voted for Melissa Bean because Melissa Bean got him to go to the White House. And he said, anybody can get me in the White House has my vote. So that's a big advantage casework has for us.
And I know, Mr. Schneider, I want to thank you personally for helping my family to expedite our passport request when we were having a difficult time. As a constituent, I greatly appreciate that. Again, can you speak a little bit more as to why incumbents are so much more visible to their constituents, specifically with reference to the franking privilege?
Certainly, you might notice some mail coming to your homes out there, students and Miss Bonities, from my office, just telling you what I'm up to, things I've done, legislation I've sponsored, issues that are kind of facing the district. And the nice part about that is I get to use my frank or my signature as the postage, so I can just send that home to you. Now, it's still paid for at taxpayer expense, but I don't have to put a stamp on there. Okay, so it's just another way to get my name out there and communicate with you. Now, I can't do this anytime. I can only do this outside of the window of 30 days before a primary election and 60 days before a general election. Because if you got this the week before the election, probably would look like I was campaigning, and we don't want our tax dollars going to that. Okay. Now, my predecessor in the district was before Mr. Dole was Mark Kirk. All right, and here's Mark Kirk, a letter that he sent home with his franking privilege. You'll notice where the stamp would be was his signature. So all I have to do is put my signature there, and it's good to be sent home. Now back to casework, you can also notice that if you need help with federal issues, all right, you can go ahead and call the office, and they will take care of any of those issues there for you. So it's kind of promote my casework as well as the franking privilege.
Thank you. Oh, look at that. Kuhn family. I see some mail from Mark Kirk's office with the family focus. If you could speak a little bit about that. And also, I want to point out, so your opponent would not have the advantage of using their signature. They would have to pay for the stamp.
Correct. So if Mr. Dole wants to do a mailer to you, it's going to cost him about $20,000, where I would send it on taxpayer expense, as long as I'm not campaigning. That's key. Okay. So this family focus, yeah, we usually target our audience a little bit here. So for example, this was sent to the Kuhn family who has young kids. So we're going to want to communicate with them that we got the lead out of the imported toys and Tickle Me Elmo and Dora the Explorer and kept their kids safe. So they're going to say, hey, they kept my kids safe. I want to vote for that guy. And I also tried this year unsuccessfully to send graduation announcements to everybody that graduated from Mundelein High School, but the old principal didn't want to do that because she thought it was for political purposes. But of course it wasn't political purposes. I just wanted to let you know that as a congressman, I was proud you graduated from Mundelein High School. So maybe this year we'll be able to send some.
Thank you. I was very glad and appreciative of Mr. Kirk at helping to get the lead out of all the Polly Pockets that I had gotten for my nieces. Can you talk about the importance of the media and your access to the media that perhaps your opponent would not have?
Certainly. So being especially in a House district where media is so critical, I'm on television, I'm on C-SPAN, okay, I'm in the newspaper all the time. My opponent usually doesn't get that. They're usually only known for their campaign events and things like that. So much of the media about me is going to be positive, and it's free. I don't have to pay to go on television. I just get to do an interview on Channel 11 or Channel 9, and people get to see me more frequently than my opponent.
And that would again go back to name recognition because you're out there in the media, your name is out there. Well, how do you feel about your chances with fundraising, and do you feel that through PACs, what role will that play in helping you to garner funds for your upcoming election?
Well, definitely PACs are important. PACs, we know, are political action committees, and they're allowed to donate $5,000 per election cycle per candidate. And if you look statistically, most of that money goes to incumbents. Now, why? Because they don't really care who's in office. They just want to influence the people that are in office. All right. So my challenger, Mr. Dole, is going to have a harder time raising PAC money because they don't know, not sure he's going to win or not. It might be considered a losing investment. So things like the banking industry, and financial services, food industry, labor industry, they're going to give a lot of PAC money to me because they know I'm there and they want to have that relationship. So I can raise a lot of money just through these political action meetings. I don't have to make those personal phone calls to ask individuals for $2,500. Right? However, Ms. Bonity, since it is spring and tax season, if you have an extra $2,500, would you like to support my campaign?
Oh, very nice. Thank you. I'll definitely consider that. I think too. I know that you've spoken to the Mundelein High School students 3 times. Once while you were campaigning, once as a very new congressperson, and then again this past fall as an experienced congressperson. Can you talk about your role and the impact of campaigning and your experience with that?
Most definitely. So it's going to be a little tougher in this election for me just because I'm running against the same opponent I did before. But if somebody newer to enter this arena, like in the 14th district, Mr. Hultgren has already won his campaign a couple times. So he has his campaign staff in place, as do we. In fact, you can go to YouTube and see us doing Call Me Maybe if you really want to listen to that. But my campaigners are on staff. They're ready to work, and they know what they're doing. I have my signs already made up, and have my mailing list, all that kind of stuff already in place. I don't have to do any new campaign work or anything like that. The people in my office cannot campaign for me while they're working. They would have to work off the clock. So they would work an 8-hour day with me and then have to then work their campaigning. But I definitely want them working for me because, after all, if I get elected, they keep their job. If I lose, they're back on the streets.
Thank you for that explanation. Can you speak to the impact of your voting record and the impact on your constituents and how that can be an advantage to an incumbent?
Most definitely. Those can be a positive and a negative, but for the most part, people know where I stand. They're going to know my stance on the issues. They can see my voting record. They can look up everything that I've done, so they know where I'm at. Where candidates, they don't have a voting record. They haven't run before, so a lot of things that they're saying are just can be considered fluff without giving any specific details. So voting record definitely gives people a better chance to evaluate me. But if I take controversial votes or maybe vote for something like Obamacare, that could be something that could hurt me as well. But in a district like ours, I think I'm in good shape.
The last thing I'd like to ask you about today is the impact of gerrymandering. I know that I would not be among those, but many people have argued that the redistricting that occurred after the reapportionment of the 2010 census, the gerrymandering that resulted really led to an advantage, a tremendous advantage for you.
Oh, of course that didn't happen. We are totally honest and upstanding in the state of Illinois, and we would never redraw districts for political purposes. But yes, in several other states, the state legislatures get to do the redistricting, and they want to favor the incumbents. They want to keep people in office that are already there. So what will often happen is they will trade votes and say, you can have some of my Republicans if I can have some of your Democrats, and so on. Okay, this is the 4th district here in Chicago that you see on the screen. We'll talk, I'm sure you'll talk about that more in class later on. Okay, but usually when they draw the district lines, we want to make sure that we can add voters. And actually, in our district, the 10th in Illinois, they did add about 8% more Democrats from other districts to kind of help me out. And I won by 1%. So gerrymandering, I guess, did play, but it wasn't gerrymandering, it was redistricting. Gerrymandering is only when we do it for political purposes.
Thank you so much, Congressman Schneider, for your time here today and for visiting us in the Kuhn Academy. And as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Thank you for listening, and remember, we're building responsible voters one video at a time.